Welcome to the Non-Emergent Evacuation Process course. The objective of this training is to review the sequential process for moving patients during a non-emergent evacuation. This program will begin by defining movement teams and then describe the actual sequence of patient flow. The movement of patients from their at-risk location to a safe destination occurs through a series of coordinated steps involving various movement teams, temporary patient care and staging areas, and designated incident managers. Patients are categorized or triaged based on their mobility level and are paired with their medical records and necessary patient care equipment for evacuation to begin. The first stage of patient evacuation begins with a horizontal movement team. Horizontal movement teams transport patients from a unit to a designated patient holding area on the affected floor, or to a stairway or elevator lobby on their floor. The role of those teams is typically less physically taxing than vertical movement teams, as it does not include lifting and carrying patients on stairs. Teams consist of 2 to 5 people from the affected and adjoining units, depending on staff availability, patient acuity, and patient mobility level. Each team has a team leader who reports to the evacuation group supervisor or evacuation branch director as assigned. Teams are identified numerically in order of establishment. A team is assigned to move a specific patient or group and remain with them until care is handed off to staff in the patient holding area or to a vertical movement team. Horizontal movement teams report to the evacuation group supervisor for reassignment to new patients once they have completed a move. Once the majority of patients are moved, teams are demobilized and may be assigned to other duties, including patient care in the patient holding area. A patient holding area is a designated temporary location where patients are moved during a relocation or evacuation. It is typically in a location on the safe side of a smoke or fire barrier near the top of a transport shaft, such as a stairway or elevator lobby. Ideally, patient holding areas on each floor or area are planned for in advance and are identified by signs posted, as well as notations on the unit's emergency plan. While in the holding area, patient care is maintained as needed, while a determination is made as to their onward destination. Depending on the circumstances and the physical layout of the facility, there may be multiple patient holding areas established. In an emergent full facility evacuation, where patients, visitors, and staff must exit quickly, one or more patient holding areas may be established at a nearby hospital building, school, or other alternate care facility until patients can be properly moved off-site. Each patient holding area should be provided with 1 or more surge area supply carts that include basic materials necessary for ongoing supportive care. Vertical movement teams move patients from a patient holding area to a patient loading area on the ground floor. In some circumstances, such as ground floor flooding, patients may need to be evacuated vertically to a higher floor. The role of vertical movement teams is typically physically taxing, as it likely involves lifting and carrying patients downstairs. Typical team assignments consist of staff from the transportation unit, maintenance and housekeeping departments, supported by public safety responders like firefighters and EMS personnel if conditions warrant. Each team should have a team leader assigned who reports to the evacuation branch director. Teams consist of 2 to 5 people, depending on staff and elevator availability. If elevators are not operational, vertical movement teams carry patients downstairs using available equipment and devices. In multi-story buildings, teams deploy approximately every 3 floors in order to minimize the burden of carrying any patient down more than 3 flights of stairs. Teams should consist of a minimum of 4 personnel and a leader, equipped with portable lighting, work gloves, and available patient movement devices, such as evacuation chairs, evacuation sleds, backboards, and basket stretchers. Should public safety personnel respond to assist, they would likely be assigned to assist the vertical movement teams with their task. Vertical movement teams are identified numerically in order of establishment. Each team is assigned to move a specific patient or group and remain with them until care is handed off to staff in the designated patient loading area. A patient loading area is a designated temporary location where patients are staged for loading onto vehicles departing the facility. Typically, separate patient loading areas are established strategically near exit points for discharged, walking, wheelchair, and stretcher-bound patients. Each area is staffed as needed to provide continuity of care and patient tracking coordination. Movement of patients from the loading area is typically carried out by either loading area staff or crew of the transporting vehicle if it is an ambulance. During a planned or urgent evacuation, patients are moved according to the following general sequencing guidelines. Move the greatest number of patients in the fastest way possible. Move patients from easiest to hardest. Move patients from closest to the exits to furthest away, so that groups don't have to evacuate through other groups waiting to evacuate. And move patients from lowest clinical severity to highest clinical severity. Patients who can walk and maneuver stairs without assistance are moved first, as they are easiest and fastest to evacuate, while both staff and equipment are being mobilized for wheelchair patients. Ambulatory patients should be identified with a bright green armband. Move wheelchair patients second, once all ambulatory patients clear the corridors and staircases. Give them a bright yellow armband, and begin moving those closest to the wheelchair holding area. Once moved by the vertical movement team to the wheelchair loading area on the ground floor, place them into stationary seating to await transportation if possible. Doing so makes their wheelchairs available for reuse. Leave wheelchair patients under the care of the wheelchair loading area staff, and redirect the wheelchairs and accompanying staff to the next patient or area of need. Stretcher-bound patients marked with bright red wristbands are moved last, generally in 3 phases. Those categorized as lowest acuity are moved first, as they require the fewest resources. When instructed to leave their designated holding area, move these stretcher-bound patients to the non-urgent section of the stretcher loading area where they are held awaiting transport. Move moderate acuity patients next. Last to move are the critical care patients, who should be loaded immediately into available ambulances for departure whenever possible. If necessary, they may be held briefly in the critical care area of the stretcher loading area that may be set up in the emergency department. We just presented the sequence in which patients should be moved. Do you remember the order? Drag and drop the patients into the correct movement sequence. Give particular consideration to the care, holding, and in-transit management of specialty care patients. This includes those receiving specialty referral care for burns, trauma, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, neonatal, or obstetric care. They may also include those who are immunosuppressed or require contact, droplet, or airborne isolation precautions. While these patients are moved based on their mobility levels, they may require additional personnel or specialized staff, equipment, or monitoring in transit. Patients who are morbidly obese present unique challenges in 2 ways, particularly when elevators are not available for evacuation. First, if they are non-ambulatory, they may require extensive staff support and specialized equipment for movement. Second, any interruption in their movement may inhibit passage for others who follow behind them. For example, if such a patient collapses in a stairwell, the stairs may be effectively blocked until additional resources can assist in a rescue. Furthermore, a rescue of this type is typically time-consuming and labor-intensive. For these reasons, consideration should be given on a case-by-case basis to evacuating these patients last, when maximal resources can be brought to bear and the risk of blocking evacuation routes has least impact. Note that the priority in an urgent evacuation is efficiency, requiring clearance of corridors and stairwells as quickly as possible. During an urgent evacuation, move patients being discharged to the discharge loading area in accordance with their mobility level. If they are walking, they move at the same time as the ambulatory patients. Wheelchair and non-ambulatory patients move with their groups. Since a planned evacuation may occur over several hours, if not days, all patients to be discharged should be moved well in advance of those being evacuated. The use of elevators is a key component of vertical evacuation in a hospital. Hospital elevators have varying capacities. On each floor, the hallway door of each elevator should be marked with a numbering system showing the car number, its operational status when the hospital is operating on generator power, and its capacity for bed, stretcher, and wheelchair patients. The following considerations apply. During a fire emergency, no elevators may be used in an affected building without the specific authorization of the fire department incident commander. First priority for elevator use and clearance for safe elevator use during a fire emergency is always the jurisdiction of the fire department. During any other incident type, or when approved by the fire department incident commander, the infrastructure branch director from the operations section should assume responsibility for elevator control and operation. The mission of the elevator control operation is to optimize vertical movement of critical resources and evacuees between floors. A lobby elevator controller should be established in each elevator lobby. As quickly as possible, any usable elevators that will support the evacuation should be staffed with engineering and maintenance personnel assigned as elevator operators. The lobby elevator controller becomes the coordination point between individual elevator car operators and the evacuation group supervisor. As an evacuation group prepares patients for movement, they coordinate with the lobby elevator controller to assign a car suitable for the load. Designate elevator operators by car number and communicate with the lobby elevator controller primarily by the assigned radio channel or secondarily by the elevator car phone. Elevator operators control their assigned elevators through the use of the firefighter's override key and carry out the movement orders of the lobby elevator controller. When available, dispatch additional engineering and maintenance personnel to assigned floors to evaluate the egress path from an affected area. It is their job to make sure the path is maintained and unobstructed. In this course, we have presented the process of carrying out a non-emergent patient evacuation, including the steps in the evacuation process, as well as presenting the flow and sequencing of patient movement. In subsequent courses, we will discuss evacuation planning, training, exercises, and incident